Hi everyone, it's me, Krylios, Team Rayceen Productions MC and producer. And joining me today is the goddess of DC, Rayceen Pendarvis. Welcome.
Bam! Greetings and salutations, all.
Hey Rayceen.
Hey,
Today
my
we
love.
have we have a fabulous guest with us today. Today we have Mecca Jamilah Sullivan, author extraordinaire, with us today.
Hello, hello. I'm so excited to be here with y'all.
We're
It
excited
is
to
so
have
great
you.
to have you here with us today. How are you doing, Mecca?
I'm doing well. Today is a good day, I can't complain. How are you all doing?
Wonderful, blessed.
Wonderful, wonderful. It's so great to have you here with us again.
Yes.
It was great having a conversation with you before, and it is great to have you here again. But for anyone who didn't catch our first conversation months ago, please introduce yourself to our audience and let them know a little bit about your background and experience.
Sure. My name is Mecca Jamilah Sullivan. I'm a writer, an English professor, a literary scholar. I'm the author of a few books. My first was a short story collection titled Blue Talk and Love. My second was an academic literary theory book called The Poetics of Difference, Queer Feminist Forms in the African Diaspora. And now just, freshly dropped in these streets is my novel, Big Girl, which comes out today. And I'm so excited to share with y'all. And in my writing, I really think about Black queer communities, Black women, sort of the all of the different kind of paths we take to make space for ourselves and for our bodies in the world. So, and I recently moved to DC, so I can't think of any sort of better forum in which to share, this book and talk about my work than Team Rayceen.
How about that? We're excited to have you. So before we dwell into the new book, how does it feel to be in Washington, D.C.?
I love it. Yeah, I love it. So I say I moved recently. I mean, I guess you know how time goes, especially in these last few years. I guess it wasn't all that recent. I moved in January. I moved from Philadelphia. I'm born and raised in Harlem, but was living in Philadelphia and moved in January. And of course, January, it was such a kind of hectic time. Things were back online, things were kind of shut down again. So, I'm happy to be able to actually be out in DC a little bit more and really kind of get to know the city, get to know the culture. It feels very familiar, because in some ways it's not that different from New York and, not that different from Harlem, really, in terms of a neighborhood that has, strong community roots and that is, sort of is in processes of change, right? So
Yes,
there's something very familiar about that to me.
You're reading my mind. You're reading my mind. I mean, a girl from Harlem. In Harlem, I love Harlem. That's my second home, honey.
Okay.
Harlem, Apollo Theater, 125th Street. And as you walk through Harlem,
yes,
and the wonderful, rich history of Harlem and the streets, and you can feel it, the brownstones, just all this wonderful, you can hear your ancestors calling you, just speaking to you. I hear them yelling and telling us the stories of what Harlem was like in the Renaissance era. And it was that richness of neighborhoods that are fighting, we're all fighting, especially in DC. The echoes of and the terrible pain of gentrification.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's important to kind of call it what it is, right? That, and I'm very grateful to hear that you connect with what I'm saying, because this is how I have felt walking around DC. I really feel that similar. I mean, even just looking at again, the neighborhoods, the buildings, the stories that are present here, and you feel them, as you said, you feel them, you hear them, even if you talk to folks, and yet you also can see before your eyes the neighborhoods in flux, the neighborhoods changing, right? And there's something, on one hand, we embrace maybe change as part of life, and some of these changes are maybe positive in the sense that I was talking to a friend who grew up in Columbia Heights, and he's like, oh, but now there's a CVS and I can go to the store when I need to and whatever. And but of course the downside is what small business had to disappear for that CVS to be there? Who had to move out? Who's been displaced, right? So this is a story that's really familiar for me as somebody from Harlem. And actually it's one of the major themes of the novel as well.
I
you know,
was just about to jump into that. Big
you already on it, you know. I appreciate that.
First of all, when it comes to the big girl cover, you get it, baby. Big girl. I love the big font. It's giant. It's bold, and it's something you see within the words are those buildings, you know, is that piece of the city's history, its architectural history, and how that shapes the story and the narrative. So let's get into the big girl. What's the premise for Big Girl, and what inspired this story, and what are the themes that you wanted to explore and did jump into and explore within Big Girl?
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. So, you know, as I kind of mentioned, you know, when we first started talking, Big Girl is about Black women, Black girls, Black queer people, and the paths we take often across generations to make space for ourselves and for our bodies in a world that's not made for us. And, you know, so it follows the story of a girl named Malaya Clondon from the time she's 8 to the time she's a teenager. And we meet her when she's 8 years old and just becoming sort of you know, brought into a view of her body that, you know, is a body that's wrong, right? The idea that her body is something that has to change. She's just now becoming aware that those around her want her body to change for many reasons, right? Some of them, it's because, you know, her body doesn't fit their idea of what a woman should be or what a girl should look like. So there's a gender piece there too. For others, it's, you know, a concern for her health, a concern that she may not, you know, sort of live the fullest life or what they imagine the life should be that she wants to live, right? So in some ways, it's a coming of age story where we see her coming to make decisions for herself and her own life and her own body. But all of this is happening against the backdrop of Harlem in the 1990s. So it's that first kind of big wave of, you know, what has become a pretty overwhelming gentrification of the neighborhood. So when, you know, her family moves to Harlem, she's definitely, you know, it's just at the moment that crack is getting ready to hit, right? And so, you know, her parents are interested in, you know, kind of creating a community for her where they imagine that she's going to be running around playing with the kids in the hood and everything. But of course, she starts collecting crack vials, and her parents are like, okay, no, this is not a game, right? Like, this is not, you know, the vision of what the community is supposed to be starts to change for them. And suddenly the vision of the neighborhood begins to change. We see, you know, businesses kind of start to shutter, right? All the bodegas start to kind of close down, and we start to get these big chain businesses. So as Malaya's relationship to her body is changing, so too the neighborhood around her is changing. And in both cases, it's really about sort of how do we define ourselves inside of change that's motivated by external and systemic powers, right? That really want to tell us who to be and what to do.
Oh, wow.
How unique this book is to such a pivotal time in that those early 1990s in Harlem. You know, I'm thinking of the round the way girl, the asymmetric cuts, the door knockers,
right?
Door knockers. I am thinking Mary J. Blige, blasting in the background, walking along Harlem streets when at a time, like you say, this book, it paints such an amazing picture of that time, a time that you can't get back, that a time that we all want to go back to, as dysfunctional as it can be for some. It was still such a coming of age for so many people, you know, of that time when somebody tells you can't be big and you can't be bold, but the roundaway girls were shapy, and they had hips and they had thighs and they had breasts and they had it all going on. But in a time when somebody was telling you, well, wait a minute, you can't be this, you can't be that, but yet one side is pulling you another side and another side is pulling you another way, and you are trying to find out who you are. And for a young Black girl, what that looks like, trying to find out who she is at a time when so much is pulling her left to the right and she's just trying to be in the middle and navigate and find who she is in this world that's ever changing.
Yes. Exactly. And to hold on to who she knows she is, right? Because as you pointed out, a lot of these messages are coming from outside. And of course, as a child, everything you learn at first is from the outside. And part of, as you said, that coming of age process is really coming to see, okay, well, how do I separate myself from all the messages I'm getting outside? Who am I, right? Independent of whoever somebody else wants me to be or whoever someone else is telling me I should be. And in some ways, I think that's similar to the story of Harlem, right? That like, it's a wealth. Harlem has a wealth of riches and resources that everyone throughout the world wants to own, to exploit, to commodify, right? To define. And yet the spirit of the neighborhood, and I'm seeing something very similar with DC, right? Areas of DC, the spirit of the neighborhood, the spirit of the people who live in these neighborhoods, that's something you can't stifle, right? You can't kill that. And so Malaya is really kind of trying to figure out, what is that core within me that nobody can touch, no one can change, right? And once I find it, what do I do with it? And so what you said about, her entire identity, that's 100% what she's going through. People are telling her, well, your body needs to change. You need to eat this. You need to move this way, even to the point of you need to sit this way. You need to, you need to kind of perform femininity. Again, there really is a kind of critique of gender here too, right? Here's what it is to be a lady. Malaya thinks of it as ladiness, right? Her grandmother is like, you're failing at being a girl. And she's like, well, I thought I was a girl, but I want to wear these, it's 90s, like you said. I want my big old Karl Kani jeans.
Yes.
I want to wear my boxers like Aaliyah does. But that's not what a girl is supposed to do, right?
Yes.
So she looks to hip hop. So I love that you've mentioned LL, right, with the Round the Way Girl, Mary, right? These are the people who she's listening to. And of course, another person she's listening to is Biggie. Biggie is a major kind of figure for her, because for her, Biggie is somebody who represents what a big body can be and can do in ways that are complex, right? That sometimes we see him, juicy. It was all a dream, right? He's like, everything is great. My life is fabulous. Other times he's depressed, right? He's vulnerable. Sometimes he's just happy. I think about the video for Hypnotized, where I don't know, I'm definitely dating myself, but where we see him with like a full cheese and Kool-Aid smile, right? This is a figure that for Malaya represents the ability to be all of who you are as a big Black person, right? And even, some of the stuff around gender and sexuality too. Malaya, I definitely see Malaya as a queer character. And it's interesting to see how some folks think of her as a character who's experimenting, which I imagine, on a theoretical level, I guess we all experimenting, especially at that age, right? But to me, it's important to claim and acknowledge that Malaya, this is part of who she is as well. And this is another part of herself that she's refusing to, sort of downplay or ignore just because people tell her that's not who she's supposed to be.
Certainly. Tell me, how did you approach creating Big Girl, crafting that narrative, bringing this project together as opposed to previous projects that are different from Big Girl?
Yeah, well, Krylios, it's so funny that you say that because, in some ways, so Big Girl is my third book, right? As I mentioned, but it's actually the first book that I started writing. And, to me, more deeply than that, it's the first book I ever imagined writing. It's the book that made me want to be a writer.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Wow. Is it drawn on stories of people you know? Because as I was reading about this character and reading about the book, it's like clumps of so many other people that I knew.
Oh, I love that.
I was clumping up like her image of what she would look like. Of course, I'm, in the film, I'm always, I'm playing the film, honey.
Name it and claim it. I love it. Well, yes, absolutely. Right. So, I always say Big Girl is a fiction, but it's a fiction close to my heart. There are many circumstances and experiences that Malaya has throughout the novel that, sort of are similar to experiences that I myself have had. And, I think that's part of why I knew that this is a novel I wanted to write. Audre Lorde says, I started writing because I felt a need in me to create something that wasn't there. And, that's exactly what I felt, right? Like there's an internal need for something that you don't find in the world. And so you have to make it. Toni Morrison has a similar, line where she says, if there's a book you want to read and and it hasn't been written yet, you must write it, right?
Yeah.
So, I grew up reading James Baldwin, Ntozake Shange, Lord, Toni Morrison, Jamaica Kincaid. And as I grew up reading, first of all, I read many of these texts way before I was supposed to, right? None of these are like young adult authors per se. But, I was that little girl who was in the, my mother's library or in the bookstore, whatever, kind of looking through and finding the parts where you saw characters doing the things they weren't supposed to do, right? And being ways they weren't supposed to be, being who they were, even if it wasn't allowed. And so that when I realized that that's something that one could do for a living, I thought, okay, well, this is what I'm gonna do. But I was looking for, well, where's the story about the big girl? Like where's the story about what I'm going through in my body? And I, there have been many novels written about big people and big women, but nothing that articulated this particular story about fatness, gender, class, and sexuality in a way that was really important to me. So that's what brought me to it. So I started that, and in some ways, I always say, like, I started writing the novel when I was working on my master's degree many, many years ago. But the novel has been with me even longer than that, right? It's been with me as long as I have sort of realized that writing about a fat Black girl's life was something that one could do. That's when I really started thinking with this novel. That's when this novel really sort of came into my life.
I love that.
I can't wait to read it because I just the name and the imaging. And when I start looking within the words and start seeing the Harlem brownstones, and then as I was reading about the book, I was like, you know what, this is going to be one of those novels. And when I think of novels like that, I will never forget. You read a book and it will stay with you. As I was reading about this book, I said, this is going to be one of those books that will be like The Bluest Eye.
Wow. Ooh,
that you think of Pia Cola. I read that 30 plus years ago and it stayed with me. Right. I've read the book, The Coldest Winter Ever.
Okay.
And that character has always lived in me. And just big girl and her just like, that'll be one of those images when the reader finishes that book that will stay with us forever.
Because there's something about creating those characters that are so relatable and capturing some of those moments as well that are relatable. People can just really connect with it, especially small moments that you might even think nobody else has experienced, but you realize we've all experienced. And some of your inspirations that you spoke about, including Jamaica Kincaid, Audre Lorde, they have the tendency to be able to do that as well. And my new book is dropping this summer, and it actually opens with a piece of prose written by me, inspired by Jamaica Kincaid's Girl. Because the first time I read Girl, I connected to it, and it wasn't even really about me, but that specific experience. And so I wrote a piece of prose entitled The Fairy, which is heavily inspired by that. Talk to me a little bit about those inspirations and how you're able to capture some of those essences and infuse them into your work.
Yeah. First of all, I can't wait to read your book. And yeah, Kincaid, I feel like we don't talk about Kincaid enough. She's an incredible writer. And, in fact, to the points that both of you are making, what she does with coming of age, right? So many of her novels center on coming of age in such deep ways. The point about that you made, Rayceen, about memorable characters, right? To me, she's right in there. Her characters stay with you. Lucy, I feel like Lucy is my homegirl. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like I know Lucy. I feel like Lucy knows me. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And I think that part of that is narrative voice. What they do with these narrators, these voices, where you feel like you're living life with the character. You're walking through the world with the character. Rayceen, you mentioned Pecola from Morrison's The Bluest Eye. That's another one, right? Where you feel like you feel what Pecola is feeling for better and for worse. When
Mhm.
Pecola feels pain, you feel pain. When Pecola feels joy, you feel joy. And I think that's what helps readers really connect with characters. And in some ways, that's why we read, right? At least that's why I read. You know, I want to make sense of my own experience. I want to know I'm not alone in my own experience. I want language for some of the things that I'm feeling and thinking that I might not have been able to verbalize yet, you know?
Mhm.
And I think that Kincaid is one of those people who do that. I teach that short story girl every semester.
Oh, you
They
do.
love it. They get it, right? So for folks who might not be, you know, so you, first of all, it's very short, so you can find it easily. And it's basically, it's a voice of, you know, a mother figure sort of instructing a girl into how to be a lady. This is how you wash your clothes. This is how you eat food. This is how you touch the bread, or this is how you pick bread at the market, right? And it's almost all, it's very, you know, there's a kind of sort of poetic repetition happening, right? Literally, this is how you, this is how you, this is how you. And then, you know, towards the end, you get the voice of the girl breaking in and saying, but wait, what if I don't do this? What if this doesn't work, right? What if I'm not able to be a woman or be a girl in the way you're telling me to? And then the mother sort of dismisses it in this really interesting way. It's like,
I
and
love it. I love it
like,
so much.
yeah. And so to, you know, to answer your question, you know, these, for me, these writers are influential, not only as a reader, but also as from a craft perspective. Like when I sit down and think, okay, how does Kincaid do that? How does she make me feel what these characters are feeling? Even the characters who are, you know, quote unquote villains, right? Even the characters who aren't, you know, aren't the heroes, they're not the good ones, but you still have that emotional connection. Like you said, it's relatable. And I think a lot of that has to do with what she does with voice. She lets you into the inner worlds of these characters so that you can't not sort of feel some of what they're feeling. And for me, that's the transformative experience of literature.
And it's amazing, you know, and I'm thinking your ability from what I just read about the book. And I was saying, well, what is the mother's background? Who is she? And why does she want this daughter to look and be and in a world where it's already hard to be Black. It's already hard to be a woman. It's already hard to be all of these things. And she's forcing all of this other stuff about this image of, and taking her to Weight Watchers, telling this young child, you are not enough. And where did that come from? So, you know, I was like, I said, oh, this mother must have some unpacking to do.
So the Weight Watchers also makes the 90s jump out, baby.
Okay. Exactly. But you know what? I'm so happy to hear that because, you know, there's an answer to that question, right? Like, you know, like humans, like real people, everyone, there's a reason why people do the things they do, right? And if we, you know, and this is not to say that everybody does what they should do or that people don't do terribly violent things, but, you know, as a writer, it's my job to figure out, well, what is the reason, right? If I want her to be a full character, I need to know why she makes those choices for her daughter. And the reason is these are the choices that her mother made for her, right? So Malaya's grandmother is an important character. And in fact, you know, Malaya starts to ask herself those same questions. Well, why is my mother so dissatisfied with me, right? Why is it that I can never be enough for my mother? It's in seeing her grandmother and how her grandmother talks about and to her mother that she starts to put things together and think, okay, this is a pattern, right? Like this, and she wonders, like, how many generations back does this go? You know, for how many generations have we been told that our bodies are not enough, that our bodies are wrong, and that we're not capable of defining who we are, right? That this is something that is not just her own experience, even if she's the one living it in the moment.
Certainly. Well, the book is out today. So, Mecca, now that it is out, looking for, what do you want the legacy of Big Girl to be? Years later, when we talk about Big Girl and we mention Big Girl, what would you want people to take away from Big Girl?
That's a wonderful question. So I think I have two answers, right? The first comes from what you said earlier, Rayceen, this idea of, you know, these characters being people that we know and people that we feel connected to. You know, that same need that I felt to see a character who's really thinking about fatness, about bodies, and about queerness within a conversation about Black girlhood, I really want to contribute that. I hope that this character in this novel, sort of flesh out, right? If you will, no pun intended, but I hope it fleshes out and sort of expands, the conversation, the literary conversation about Black girlhood and Black womanhood and Black queer literature. I think there's also an important sort of space in Black queer literature to talk about fatness, about big bodies, right? And sort of how they fit into our cultures and our communities. So that's, on one hand. And then the other is just simply, I get a lot of emails from readers, and I feel so fortunate to have that experience. It's a real, it's a gift to be able to sort of receive comments from those who you create for, you know what I'm saying? And one of the things that I've been hearing lately is folks who are just saying, like, I've never read my story, and this is my story. And so that I see that as part of the legacy, even that's it's a more individual kind of legacy, but to me, it's just as important to really kind of give people again, the kind of the gift, the beauty, the blessing that literature offers in terms of helping us feel less alone, feel understood, and offering language for the experiences that we might not have been able to articulate yet.
Awesome, amazing. Mecca, thank you so much for joining us today. How can people pick up Big Girl? How can they find out more about you, your other writings, and of course, follow and keep up with you?
Yeah, so you can pick up Big Girl pretty much wherever books are sold. I encourage folks to, support independent bookstores. Loyalty Bookshop, actually, here in DC, they have the book. We also have a launch happening tomorrow at Jack Lee's. And so if you go to Loyalty Bookshop's website, you'll be able to find the link to the event. I'm excited about it for lots of reasons, including that they're making themed cocktails. Cocktails that are like based on the novel, like based on the character. So I'm very excited about that. So the tickets are available for purchase. So come through. I really hope to see folks tomorrow. And yeah, you can find me on, on the gram. You can find me on Facebook, on Twitter. My website is there. Goodreads. I encourage folks to rate and review the novel. And yeah, you can find the book, wherever books are sold. So I hope folks pick it up and take a look.
Awesome. Well, we are going to have those links in the description below. The book is out right now. Big Girl by Mecca Jamilah Sullivan. Pick it up today. Thank you so much for joining us. Those watching, please follow Team Rayceen Productions at Team Rayceen on all forms of social media. Click around our YouTube channel and check out our other interviews, vlogs, forums, and more. And while you're at it, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. But most of all, thank you for watching. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.